You didn't notice them leaving at first. One day the queue felt calmer, almost companionable, with a nod exchanged and a patient shuffle forward. Conversations seemed warmer too, carried in softer tones, as if strangers shared an unspoken agreement to look after the moment. Back then, people noticed one another in small, human ways. The curious thing is, there was no announcement when that changed, no debate, no rulebook torn up. These little manners didn't vanish overnight, they slipped away quietly. And as you listen now, you may feel that tug of recognition, the sense that you remember it. Long before anyone talked about etiquette guides or social rules, we simply knew how to behave. Manners in post-war Britain weren't delivered as lectures. They were absorbed, almost by osmosis. You picked them up in the way adults spoke to shopkeepers, how neighbors greeted one another, how silence fell naturally in certain places. As children, we were gently corrected, often with a look rather than words, and that was enough. Communities were closer then, not just geographically but socially. Streets felt shared, not anonymous. With fewer distractions pulling attention away, people noticed who was around them and adjusted accordingly. Courtesy wasn't a performance, it was practical. It kept things moving smoothly, kept tempers steady, and made daily life feel manageable. Public spaces carried their own unwritten codes. You waited your turn, you lowered your voice, you acknowledged others with a nod or a smile. No one needed reminding, because everyone was doing it together. Those habits became the social glue of everyday Britain, holding small interactions in place. And it's from that quiet, collective understanding that many of the manners we remember were born. They shaped expectations, softened encounters, and made ordinary days feel steadier, kinder, and quietly dependable. For a polite pause was once so natural it barely registered. You'd see it in doorways, where someone instinctively stepped back, hand held out, inviting the other through. In conversations too, people waited, they let sentences finish, even if they already knew what was coming next. Those tiny pauses weren't awkward, they were respectful, a quiet signal that another person mattered. Back then, patience wasn't framed as weakness. It was simply how things worked. Life moved at a steadier rhythm, and there was room for courtesy to breathe. You sensed it on pavements, at counters, in shared entrances, where no one rushed quite so hard to be first. Today, the pace feels quicker, tighter, more urgent. Pauses are often filled, moments hurried along. And yet, when we remember those small acts of waiting, something clicks. They didn't just slow things down, they smoothed them out. That simple habit of letting others go first shaped how people felt around one another, and its quiet absence changed the tone of everyday life gently. There was a time when public spaces seemed to breathe more softly. On buses, voices were lowered instinctively. Conversations kept close, as if everyone understood the shared quiet mattered. Waiting rooms held a calm that felt almost comforting, broken only by the rustle of coats or a polite cough. No signs demanded silence. People simply sensed it. That awareness came from looking outward rather than inward. You noticed who was nearby, how your presence affected the space, and adjusted without thinking. Loudness felt unnecessary, even impolite, because consideration was the norm. Today, sound travels differently. Devices buzz, voices carry, and private moments spill easily into public places. It isn't about blame, just contrast. When we remember that older hush, it's not silence we miss, but the feeling of mutual care it created. That gentle quiet told everyone they belonged, together, without needing to say a word. And from that calm, other small courtesies quietly found room to exist there then. Children learned manners long before anyone explained them. They watched in shops, they stood quietly beside adults, absorbing how requests were made and thanks were given. At neighbors' doors, they noticed the pause before knocking, the greeting offered, the way adults listened without interrupting. None of it felt like a lesson, yet it stayed. Respect was demonstrated, not described. Adults modeled behavior through everyday moments, and children followed without question. At family gatherings, they observed who spoke first, how elders were acknowledged, and when it was time to sit back and wait. These patterns settled in naturally, shaping behavior that lasted decades. Today, learning often comes through instruction, rather than observation. Life moves faster, and fewer moments are shared slowly enough to watch and copy. Looking back, it's striking how powerful that quiet modeling was. Manners weren't enforced, they were inherited, and those early, unspoken lessons became habits carried into adulthood, influencing how people treated strangers, handled disagreements, and moved through the world with consideration for others around them daily. No one stood up and declared an ending. These manners didn't disappear with a bang. They drifted away as life quietly sped up. Workdays stretched, journeys grew busier, and new technologies slipped into pockets and homes, drawing attention inward. None of it was deliberate. People didn't choose to be less courteous. They were simply pulled in more directions at once. Shared spaces changed too. Communities grew larger, more transient, and familiarity thinned. When you no longer knew the faces around you, the old habits felt less automatic. Small courtesies began to seem optional rather than essential. Looking back, it's tempting to search for a single cause, but there isn't one. What faded did so gradually, almost invisibly. That's why many people don't realize what was lost until they remember how it once felt. And it's that quiet sense of loss that lingers, asking us to pause before moving on today. Do we actually miss the manners themselves, or the feeling they gave us? That gentle ease of moving through the day, knowing others were quietly looking out for one another. Perhaps it was the patience, or the sense of connection, that made ordinary moments feel softer. Times have changed, and they won't rewind, but small gestures still matter. A pause, a nod, a lowered voice can still shift the atmosphere. They remind us that courtesy never truly disappears. It waits to be noticed again. In remembering how it once felt, we find ways to carry that old British warmth forward.